Next question. How did other people figure out their business idea in the first place? That's a very interesting question. I think that from my experience, most people. Hi, my name is Octavian, and about 3 years ago, I started my own consulting firm. Ever since, I've been working with thousands of entrepreneurs, from small people just starting up to people are medium-sized businesses to even a bigger corporation. In this video, I'm going to do something really exciting. I'm going to answer the most asked questions about starting a business. My team put together a number of questions. I think they're from Reddit, and yeah, I'm going to go through all of them, and I'm going to answer your questions. So let's go. The first question is, should I start my own business before quitting my job? I think it's a great question. I think many people are having this dilemma. There is no good answer that fits everybody. Some people do really well when they keep their job and allocate a number of hours per day or per week to be able to invest in their business. And some other people like myself, they need that narrow focus. They need to quit the job, but they need to be in that situation where there is no backup. There is no safety net. So it depends to you. Like, think about yourself in your own life and think about, where do you perform better? When you have a number of options and you prepare the second plan and then you move towards it, or when you don't have any other options and you have to do something and that's your only way to be able to do it? Second question, what's the worst thing that can happen if I screw this up? That's a very interesting question, because the reality of the potential detriment is more a psychological one. It's more about putting yourself out there and failing. I think that's one of the biggest fear people have when they start a business, not necessarily the amount of money we're going to lose or the time invested they're going to lose. It's, my friends are going to think I'm a failure. So that's pretty much what drives people away from, like, what's the bigger fear people have is the fact that they don't want to appear as failure. So perhaps reevaluate that the worst case scenario is actually more psychological. And if you have the ability to be able to lower your ego and just say, I'm going to do this no matter what. I'm not going to care what people think about what I do. And it's my life. And I decide the path which I'm going to take. Then what's going to happen is going to be, we're going to fail a bunch of times. I'm going to promise you that. But you're going to be okay. You're not going to be traumatized. You're not going to be bothered so much by those failures. So yeah, keep going and ignore your perceived opinion of other people. Next question. How do I decide what I'm actually good at selling? How do I decide what I'm actually good at selling? I'm trying to understand this question. Is it, how do I decide if I'm good at selling something or not? I would respond to that question as far as I understand it. So I think people are much better at selling things they believe in. To decide whether you're good at something or not, just look around and see how persuasive are you within the group of friends you have. Like, for example, if you have an idea in mind, let's just go to see a movie tonight. How good are you at, pursuing that idea? And then one thing I would make it very clear here, that selling is a skill in itself, like any other skills. You can start your life by being much better than other people, but it's still the skill in itself. So it's like playing football or playing piano. It's still something I need to practice. So at the end of the day, doesn't really matter how good you are at selling something. It's how much time are you willing to spend to be able to build that skill. So that's what it comes to at the end of the day. Next question. How did other people figure out their business idea in the first place? That's a very interesting question. I think that from my experience, most people kind of stumble into it. Like, you start a business and you think of like, hey, I have this idea, I want to sell this product or I want to promote this service. And then the market is it's going to polish you. Like, it's going to give you very blunt feedback or no feedback at all. They're just not going to respond to you. So at the end of the day, you have to play with the markets. You have to understand the customers that you're serving. And then they will tell you, they'll tell you like, man, I like this thing, or I don't like this thing, or I'm not attracted to this idea. So people got ideas by just practicing. So what I usually tell people is that starting a business is not like one-time event. It's pretty much like an ongoing event that you're polishing over time. So there are a lot of good examples of businesses that started with one product, with one services, and they ended up on the other side or completely different things just because they evolve over time. So it's pretty much being exposed consistently to your audience and learning from your audience what those people really need. Next question. Man, I'm really having a lot of fun into this. How much money do I need to start this business? Well, I'm presuming that this person had a specific business in mind when they posed this question, but you can start a business from like zero to an endless amount of money depending on your business direction. So there is no specific amount of money that you need for a specific business. The way I work with people, I just go backwards, like, hey, how much money do you have? And let's find a way that find the business that you can start with that amount of money that you have available. Instead, we're just thinking like, I need X amount of money to be able to start this business. One of the things that I see people doing very wrong is that they invest a lot of money before testing the idea out there. So what I usually do with people, I crowd test the idea. Let's just say you have an idea for starting on a platform that does delivery services for grocery shopping. And instead of thinking about, okay, I need to spend X amount of development, I need to spend X amount of marketing, I need to spend X amount of design and all those services, you're thinking about, okay, cool. How many people are willing to actually pay for this thing? So what I would do, I would just run the Facebook ads or like Google ad or whatever, just for your specific target audience and run with the Google Doc or whatever, and just present ideas to people and see how receptive the people they are. If there is a real solution for the problem people have, they will be really interesting to figure out what it is about it. People think that, sometimes you have one shot be able to make a good impression, but sometimes not. Sometimes, you just have to be appealing enough to a problem that somebody has. So going back to that, I would say try to test the idea as cheap as possible before you invest any more money into it, and let the potential customers guide you through the process of learning how much money you should and how the product should be shaped. Next question. I absolutely love this one. Does being your own boss actually means you work less? Well, I can't really tell for everybody, but from my experience and the experience of the people that I work with, it's actually the opposite. Like when you're working with somebody else, you pretty much have a schedule. You have a 9 to 5 job or whatever timing you're working, and you start at the beginning of the shift and then you end and then just go. Sometimes you have calls outside, blah, blah, blah. But roughly speaking, you have like about 8 hours. Now, when you're working for yourself, things are a bit different. Like it's almost like I can just this little thing and this little thing as well. Like I send this email and you're just going home, like probably if you're not working from home, you're always like, there are little things that you can just do make some progress. And being an entrepreneur means that you're ambitious. And more often than not, what I've experienced is that people who are entrepreneurs, they tend to work a lot more than normal people. So I think that a boss out there, an average boss out there, it's much kinder than I am on myself. So if you want to start your own business, you have to be careful of that. Whenever other people are kinder towards you than you are towards yourself. So yeah, doesn't necessarily mean you have to be able to stop yourself. You have to be able to have self-control. Either way, like get to work or like stop working. But yeah, you have a lot more flexibility, but that means that you have to put closer boundaries for yourself. So it's up to you to decide. Do I need social media to sell anything at all? The answer to that is no. If you can't sell something just by talking to somebody, just pick up the phone or like, sending an email or just having a conversation with somebody randomly on the street, social media is not going to help you much. Social media, it's a good tool to use to be able to build trust around the brands, but it's not going to substitute the value of the product and your ability to be able to sell. So social media can help, but it's not a game changer unless you already have a huge following and then you start from there. But like, presuming that you started a new business now and you have no followers on social media and then you have no network and you're thinking about, where do I invest? Do I invest in my network or do I invest in social media? My advice for you is to go in both directions, but at the beginning, most of the business is going to come from the network and from the outreach. And then social media has a lot of potential, but it's more an exponential growth. So it starts very slow. And then if you're consistent with it, it's going to boom later on. But at the beginning of the process, social media is not going to help that much. What should I ask before buying someone else's business? That's a good question. And I've worked for the last year for Rollup, and I've analyzed a lot of businesses. So that's a very interesting question. There is a lot of knowledge to be learned if you're interested into business acquisition. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but there are multiple factors. Like in UK, we use EBITDA multiples. Anyway, those are pretty much standard methods. What I usually pay attention to, how much dependency is on the owner. Like for example, if you have an owner that is, like one man band or like just a couple of people in, and the owner is working like 60 to 80 hours a week, and then you buy the business and the person decides to leave, then you're going to have to replace the owner either by yourself or hire somebody else. And you pretty much end up figure out that you bought a job instead of buying a business yourself. And that becomes very tricky because sometimes the owner is overly involved. I was actually hearing an interview about the fact that Mr. Beast, the biggest YouTube channel in the world, was offered $1 billion for his channel and the businesses. And I was thinking, he said like, well, that's not enough. But I was thinking to myself, like, I wouldn't be very comfortable buying that business. And one of the reasons for that is because Mr. Beast is very closely connected to his businesses. And I don't know how much value the business is going to have if he decides to depart from the business. Sometimes when you buy a business, you want to have a contract for employment for 3 years for the person, but that's pretty tricky because if the owner is overly involved in there, they can just decide to leave unless you have a clause that says like, you lose X% of your company or like X% of the money that I'm supposed to pay you. But that's one of the biggest concerns when I buy a small business. It's how much involvement does the owner have and how much do I have to replace if the owner decides to leave from the business? Is it safe to run a business online versus in a real shop? It's up to the exposure, I would say. If you have the ability to sell locally, I would recommend you start there. If you don't have that, maybe you can start online business. But so let's start with the local business. One thing I usually get, if you have a good location, you get a lot of exposure, a lot of people passing by. So sometimes just the location itself can generate maybe 50% of the business, like maybe even more than that. When you have an online business, you pretty much have zero exposure to start with, and there are so many other businesses out there. And when somebody is browsing online, they have everything to choose from. When you're locally in a region, you have a bunch of options, but they are within your proximity. So the options that people have that are near your local shop are limited. But when people are shopping online, there are unlimited options. So there are benefits and challenges on both models. So I would suggest for yourself, think about where do you feel the most comfortable. Like if you feel more comfortable online, do the online part. If you feel more comfortable into the local business, do the local business part. But they are different games and you have to treat them very differently. How did you get your first customer when you started? That's a very funny story. So when I started my business, I decided first thing first to sober up because I was drinking a lot. And I knew that if I wanted to give 100% to the business idea that I had to be sober to be able to have that focus and clarity. And I said to myself, I'm going to have the first beer after I get signed off my first clients. And what I was doing in the beginning, I was just sending a lot of cold emails. Like I was researching businesses, like, okay, that's a small business. I could talk to them. I was just sending an email like, hey, how's it going? I'm Octavian and I'm a business consultant. I can help you pretty much everything you need. It's like, I was just offering them anything. Like, like if you need me, I can just do a social media post or like I could just, build a website for you. Like I would just do anything in the beginning. And the interesting part is the first client I signed off was a guy who's doing rehabilitation programs for former addicts or like for addicts in Thailand. And I spoke to him about it. And one interesting part was that he was attracted to working with me because I also told him that I'm sober. And I found that to be very paradoxical because I decided to sober up until I got my first client. And when I got my first client, the first client signed me up partially because I was sober. So I found that to be very paradoxical. What is the biggest challenge of becoming an entrepreneur? That is a very good question. I work with a lot of people who are coming from a 9 to 5 job directly into becoming an entrepreneur. And the biggest challenge you have within that transition is that when you have a 9 to 5 job, you have a specific number of expectation and a specific outcome. So you have a job description and you have a number else you put in. Like, for example, you're graphic designer, you're, social media, you're working, I don't know, in a restaurant, you're washing dishes, whatever that is. You have an action A, and it gets what outcome X. So you know that if you do that recurrently, you're going to get the outcome you're looking for. So you know exactly what to expect. Your life is very predictable. When you start a business, you have limitless options, but you also have no predictability or very little predictability. Like you don't know the action A, B, C to get the outcome X, Y, Z. So you're kind of working on initiatives and hoping that they're going to pay off. And sometimes you can launch projects and products that are not going to pay off at all. So you can spend like hundreds of hours just working on a product that never ends being received successful by the market. So it's a very unpredictable environment to be at. So people who are good entrepreneurs are the people who are really good of managing this chaotic energy. Like they understand how to take all the options possible, limit them down, and also negotiate the old people, and having the ability to be able to define a number of tasks that they can do for somebody, or like the service providers, some products they can deliver somebody in order to get a specific outcome out of it. That was the first challenge. The second challenge would be the ability to negotiate recurrently contracts. My biggest liability when I started my own business is that I was very uncomfortable negotiating prices, which is very funny because now after a couple of years, it became my strength. So that's something that I'm very comfortable doing. But at the beginning, when I was negotiating contracts, I feel very comfortable to ask people for money. Because, when you have a job, you're in this process. Like if you've been working for a couple of years, if you're not happy with the salary, you still have a salary that you receive on a current basis. But then when you have your own business, you have to, especially if you deliver services to people, you have to negotiate prices on a recurrent basis and ask people for money, which for me at the beginning was very uncomfortable. So two things. First thing first, if you want to become an entrepreneur, learn to use your time very productively and learn to be able to make order out of chaos. Like understand that your limitless options doesn't mean that you should jump in all directions at once. So focus on what can you do to generate X outcome and define your outcomes and define the amount of money you're looking to make and how you're going to make that. And second of all, practice negotiating contracts and asking people for money, because that's perhaps the biggest skill that you need, at least at the beginning. What's a good business idea for someone with no experience? I see a lot of people doing this horribly wrong. So the best idea for you to start a business now is to look around your environment and find a problem that you could solve at a much cheaper price than the person is paying, either price or time. So let me give you a good example. I live in Portugal now, and one of the biggest problems that my friends have, like the network of digital nomads, foreigner people living here have, is delivering groceries. Like people spend a lot of time grocery shopping, and nobody likes that. And one of the things that I would do probably here is that I would start a business delivering groceries to people. And I maybe start a basic app. Somebody's sending me X amount of, just putting the list of groceries that he needs, and I just deliver to their house. So that exists in the US and people are using it, but there is not here. So I figure out an idea of something that people need and they're willing to pay for it, and there is no service like that in the area. It's really easy to kind of look around the world and see, if you're living in UK and the US or like any other countries, you can look around if the business idea that you have in your minds, it's actually been implemented. And traveling around is giving you a lot of different ideas, because you see systems that work in that one region and they do not exist in another region. It's like, we had this idea in London and there was being done, but like here in Portugal doesn't exist. So that's a great opportunity for you to start it out. So business, it's all about solving a problem for people. So think about what problem can you solve? Can you solve it cheaper than they're already doing it? And can you make a profit out of it? That's it, folks. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I hope to see you next time.